This is A Shock in the Dark. This story comes from the neighborhood called Grant Park in Atlanta, Georgia. Dear Mr. Narrator, whoever you are, I want to thank you for posting your personal story in Season 1 of A Shock in the Dark. It actually helped me get through my very own crazy situation. I've never believed in ghosts and goblins. I guess I wasn't a non-believer either. I had never really thought about those things much. Earlier this year, my roommate and I became convinced that either someone had the keys to the house we rented together or was living in our attic. It all started with small things. We would come home after work and the lights would be on throughout the house. My roommate and I are militant about conserving energy, so we knew we turned off the lights every time we left the house. In fact, my roommate has OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, so he has to check at least twice before he leaves the house that the lights and the oven are all turned off. Later that same week, on a Saturday afternoon, my roommate and I were excited about watching the new season of our favorite show that had been released that week. We had made plans to spend all Saturday binge watching it. We made popcorn and other snacks, poured our drinks, scheduled a pizza to be delivered right after the 5th episode, and got set up to watch the show. One problem: no remote. I can understand how missing a remote is not all that spooky, but this is another one that goes back to my roommate's OCD. We have to keep the remote in a pouch especially designed for it that hangs from the arm of our easy chair. The remote was not there. Even the pouch was missing. What made this worse is our stupid, cheap brand of television had absolutely no manual controls on it. Without a remote, our television was just a big black brick, like the monolith in 2001: Space Odyssey, but not as exciting. We overturned every piece of furniture. We ripped every cushion off every chair and the couch. We expanded our search to the living room, then the kitchen, and eventually our bedrooms, and even the bathrooms and the closets. We searched the washer and dryer. I eventually had a flash of brilliance and downloaded a universal TV remote to my smartphone, but it wasn't enough to save the day. Because of his condition, my roommate could not rest until the remote was found. He stayed up until the early morning hours looking everywhere, and then looking everywhere again. The next day, I bought a universal remote, and we did eventually watch the show, but when we came home from work that Thursday, I went to change clothes in my room when I heard my roommate let out a yelp. I found him in the living room, hands over his mouth, just staring. I followed his gaze across the room to see our remote control. There it was, sitting neatly on top of its pouch in exactly the center of the middle cushion of our couch. We knew then someone was doing this to us. My theory was that someone had keys to our apartment. My roommate's theory was that someone was living in our crawl space or attic. I was able to prove his theories wrong fairly quickly. The attic was clean with no way to access it from outside, and we didn't have a crawl space. Our house sat directly on a concrete slab. We bought a couple of cheap security cameras to record when there is motion or sound. One camera was on our kitchen and back door. The other camera we trained on our living room and front door. We went a week with nothing happening. Then, on a Sunday morning, my roommate came into my room and he woke me up in a panic. He just said, "Cece, wake up, come here. Cece, wake up, come here," before running out of the room.
"Wake up, come here,"
he shouted again. So I got up and lumbered into the kitchen where my roommate stood. All around him, every single drawer and cabinet was open, including the oven and the refrigerator, and even all the drawers in the refrigerator were open.
"Did you check the security camera?"
I said. He replied,
"No, I just got up and it was like this."
We went through the security footage immediately. At no time did anyone ever enter or exit our apartment. But these cameras record based on sound or movement, and it did not record the actual opening of the cabinets. It goes right from me getting a bottle of water from the fridge at 2:40 a.m. to the next shot, my roommate walking into the kitchen at 9:22 a.m., seeing all the cabinets open and gasping and running out to wake me up. The most interesting thing to me was our living room camera. At 3:32 a.m., it recorded for about 15 seconds because of a loud noise. The noise sounded very much like our utensil drawers being opened in an aggressive way. I am absolutely sure that's when it happened. I was telling my friend about all this when he suggested your videos to me. He gave me an overview and suggested I seek the help of a psychic medium. That night, I went home and listened to all of Season 1 of A Shock in the Dark. Honestly, it made me feel like I was not crazy and I was not alone. It took me a few days of Googling to eventually find help. I knew I found the right person when I asked them about the cost, and they told me they do not accept money, but they would appreciate a little gas money to cover them driving the hour and a half to where I live. I had no problem with that. The end of this story, I guess, is kind of anticlimactic. The medium came over, burned sage and some other kind of smelly stuff, said a few words to the ghost or whatever, and that was it. No more problems. By the way, I offered the medium $40 for gas, but he refused to take more than $20. And I do actually believe he is the real deal. And I guess there is something to all this paranormal stuff, which is both exciting and super scary at the same time. Just one piece of advice that I learned from this situation. Apparently, the last thing you want to do is call some ghost hunters to your house. The medium told me that there are some good ones, but a lot of them are people who've just gotten a bunch of money together and bought some fancy equipment, but have no experience whatsoever and even less common sense. Those people will usually make things a lot worse because they just want proof. They will antagonize a spirit, get it all riled up, and then leave. Your best bet is always a psychic medium who does it to help people rather than to get rich or some other motive. Again, thanks for helping me through one of the craziest periods in my life. Your friend, Cece. I'm a 23-year-old female college student. I live and work in a large southeastern American city. I never learned to drive because I just didn't. So I walk or take public transportation everywhere. On a Saturday afternoon in June of 2019, I was walking the 2 miles back home from my favorite used bookstore when I noticed a stereotypical creepy white van driving very slowly, matching my pace, on the shoulder of the road across the street. I was walking east on the left side of the road, so on the side of approaching traffic. What a day to not have a phone. When I had left my apartment, my roommate had convinced me that I needed to, quote, disconnect. So, I had taken my purse with me to the bookstore, but I had purposefully left my phone at the apartment. I was thinking about what a bad decision that was when I heard the van's window roll down, followed by a creepy voice, laughing like a crazy person as he talked.
Hey, little girl, want some candy? Want to help me find my puppy? Hey, your mom sent me to pick you up.
I tried to ignore him, but all the red flags turned into screeching, flashing light and sirens as I then heard a second man laughing from inside the van. The street I was on is always busy, but as luck would have it, there was not a single car in sight. I was immediately in a brain-dead, full panic mode. Apparently, I do not stay calm under pressure. Where could I run to? What could I use as a weapon? How can I get them to leave me alone? Suddenly, like a trumpet from God, I heard someone laying on their horn. I turned around to see that a young, attractive-looking man in a convertible was driving behind the van, but on the street, and just not letting off the horn. Just then, the van swerved across the street over to my side of the road. It stopped in front of me, blocking my path, and the doors swung open. Two of the creepiest guys I have ever seen jumped out and started for me. I thought this was the end for me, but then I heard a voice from behind me. It was Mr. Convertible. He had his phone out, aiming it at the two hooligans. I've got both your faces and your license plate, and I'm calling the police, so you just better keep moving along. Hello, 911? Yeah, there are two men trying to kidnap a woman at my location. The two men ran back to the van, jumped in, and punched the gas. They were gone. Are you okay? The man said, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't even think of the words. It dawned on me, as the adrenaline dump started, that I actually had protection on me. It's just always in my purse, so I never think about it. I always carry a projectile taser that my dad had bought me in my purse. A lot of good that did. I was so in shock with what was going on, I had not only forgotten about my taser gun, but I also carry a keychain that is vaguely shaped like a cat that can be used for self-defense. You put your fingers through its two eye holes, and then you punch with it like brass knuckles, but the cat ears happen to be made from some strong synthetic material, with the cat's sharp ears acting as sort of a stabbing weapon with every punch. Why did I have all that stuff if I couldn't even remember to use it when I most needed it? Eventually my brain rebooted and I was back in reality. Through my tears, I was able to squeeze out a "thank you" to the young man who helped me. "Look," he said, "let me give you a ride. I got to get back to work, but if it's not far." I told him that wasn't necessary, but he insisted. And I was very thankful not to have to walk another mile on my legs that now felt like noodles, worrying that that van would come back. The man introduced himself. His name was Tom. He worked as an anesthesiologist at the hospital down the street from my apartment. He was charming, and he seemed to be doing his best to cheer me up. I thought to myself, this is gonna make the best How I Met My Boyfriend story ever. We had only driven about half the distance to my apartment when he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta pick up some equipment real quick. It's right here, just give me 2 seconds." And he pulled into a large parking lot of a warehouse. He drove around to the back of this huge industrial building and into some sort of shipping dock, through a giant door, until we were actually inside this dark warehouse. My adrenaline shot through the roof as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I saw that creepy white van sitting in the middle of the empty warehouse. "It's them!" I shouted. "Drive, drive, drive!" I started slapping his shoulder and screaming for him to punch the gas, but when I turned my head and looked at him, he was sneering. Instantly, I knew this had all been a setup. A setup to get me to willingly get into a car with a stranger. And if anybody had even bothered to notice, I was willingly getting into a car. No one was struggling. No one was fighting. I wasn't screaming. I didn't do anything to cause attention. I willingly got into that car with a complete stranger. How stupid could I be? And the intention of these men could not possibly be good. Luckily, I'm a person who learns from my mistakes, and instantly I thought of the personal protection devices I had on me. I wrapped my kitty cat car keys brass knuckles around my fingers, and I just started punching old Tommy in the face and the neck. His head immediately dropped as he clasped his neck. Blood was spurting from his throat, where apparently I struck an artery or large vein. I looked up, and the 2 creeps from the van were approaching the car. I grabbed the taser and hit it low within the car. When the first man was close, I stepped out of the car, drew the weapon, took aim for the chest, and fired. I could still see it all happening in slow motion. The prongs, in a flash, being released from the taser, flying through the air, followed by 2 attached thin wires. I wondered to myself if either of these would hit the target, and if they did, if the taser would work properly. This was the first and last time I used the taser, so I was concerned that maybe the model I had was a cheap ripoff, or maybe the battery wasn't charged, or maybe it wouldn't be enough to stop this big guy. And what about the other guy? What was I going to do about him? It's insane how much time slows down in these situations. Enough to where I could have all these thoughts while these prongs were flying through the air. Well, the prongs did hit the target, but not exactly as I had intended. One of the prongs went into the guy's neck, and the other one hit him square in the center of his right eye. He immediately became stiff as a board and fell over face first onto the cold concrete floor. By this time, Handsome Tom was already simultaneously backing the car out at full speed while clutching his bloody neck. And the second creep from the van, seeing his friend being electrocuted through the eyeball, he momentarily put his hands up like he was surrendering or something, but then he jumped in the van and sped away. I just dropped the taser on the floor and started running back to the busy street, where I was able to flag someone down and call the cops. By the time the cops showed up, the 3 guys were long gone, but A few days later, I got a call from a detective. They had arrested 2 of the men when they had showed up at a hospital for their injuries. The hospital had called the police because, the one guy's neck injuries were suspicious, and the other guy had to have a taser prong removed from his eye. Eventually, old Taser Eye gave up the other guy in the van, so all 3 are now behind bars, and they have been for over 2 years. Taser Eye is up for parole in the year 2040, but the other guys will be in until at least 2050. Don't just be a person who learns from your mistakes. Learn from my mistakes too. If you want to disconnect, take your phone, just leave it off, and always have some sort of protection on you. And remind yourself that you have it, so when that moment comes, you will think to use it. I don't know where I would be right now if I didn't have protection with me that day. I hate to even think about what might have been. Dear Mr. Shock in the Dark, or narrator, or whoever you are, of all the crazy stories I've heard you talk about, I think mine must be the craziest. Not because it's so scary, not because it's especially interesting. In fact, this may be so mundane, you might not use it, but I think you will have to admit, it is weird. I'm a 34-year-old male, and not to be too specific, I live in a town near Memphis, Tennessee. 3 months ago, my fiance and I gave up our separate apartments, and we took the plunge and moved in together. We love this apartment. It has a large private balcony, a fantastic gym, we have our own washer and dryer, an interdimensional kitchen, and lots of natural light. Yes, interdimensional kitchen. Well, that's what we call it. Sometimes we call it our interdimensional kitchen, sometimes we just call it the haunted kitchen, or kitchen from hell, or kitchen of the damned. Since before we even moved in, every single person who has entered experiences some insane spookiness in our kitchen. It's almost like a weird vibe, but I don't mean it's just an odd feeling. I mean it is a strong, undeniably, deeply weird vibe that forces them out of the kitchen as they leave. Let me explain how it works. Everyone is fine as they enter the kitchen, and they can easily stay in there all day, no problem. However, when they leave the kitchen, that's where the freaky starts. Everybody leaves the kitchen like somebody just jabbed their butts with a needle. There's always a ooh or ow as they exit the kitchen. It's like they're being chased out of the kitchen by a cartoon mean granny wielding a broom as a weapon. My fiancé and I feel it too, but after 3 months, we're fairly used to it. To try to explain it, it's basically the same feeling you get when you walk past a pitch black room, but times a million. Like passing a pitch black room, you want to get away from it as fast as possible. My fiancé and I have obviously analyzed this hundreds of times over the past few months, and both of us agree. Even when you know what's going to happen, you still get this feeling that something horrible, disgusting, and dangerous will murder you if you don't get away as quickly as possible. And even as much as we've experienced this, and as much as we know nothing bad is going to happen, once we start out of the kitchen, neither of us can stop. It's like a natural instinct takes over and forces you to flinch and run. So, of course, my fiancé and I have made it into a game. Every other weekend, we have all the people who have ever experienced our kitchen over for a get-together, plus one person who has no idea what's going on. Everybody who knows what's up sits in the living room while we ask the newbie, a friend who knows nothing of our kitchen, to grab us some napkins, or would you mind grabbing me a beer from the fridge? Then everybody just waits for them to exit. The exit is always met with roars of laughter, and as our new tradition dictates, we write down their name and what they say, unprompted, about the kitchen. Here are a few examples. Sam. Whoa, what was that? Cindy. What did you guys do to me? I don't understand what just happened. David G. Oh man, I feel real dizzy all of a sudden. I gotta sit down. Darren. Oh my God, your kitchen is haunted. Steve B. That was the weirdest thing that ever happened, and I don't know what it was. Pam. What? I just don't know. I was just... James. Hey, nothing, never mind, nothing. Forget about it. The fact that this works every time means there's absolutely something happening here. What is happening? We have no idea. My fiance recently bought a mini fridge, so we don't have to go into the kitchen that often, but I'm sure the novelty will wear off soon, and then what? I guess we'll be looking for a new apartment in 8 months. I've asked my landlord if he knows about anything weird with the apartment, but he just said, "You mean like ghosts?" Nope. So here's my question, and I'm hoping you or someone else has an idea. What do we do? How do we handle this? Should we move out, or is there some way we can use this to get a cheaper rent? If there's anyone listening who has ever experienced anything like this out there, of course we would love to hear about it. Please let us know. We've not been able to find one single case like this anywhere. And please, if you have any idea of how we can use this, we could sure use the money, or at least a break in the cost of rent.